I'd like to call this meeting to order. If I could have all the members at their seats. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is the first committee hearing that we are having since we formed the Sub-6 Oversight Committee. So this is a little different. I want to kind of go into that. And first, before we do it, just to remind people, what is the Sub-6 Committee? How is it different, and how does that change our process here today? One of the chief purposes of Sub-6, which includes the chairmanship, all of the sub-chairs and many of the vice-chairs, is to allow for a smaller, more deliberative venue to flesh out the complex ways that we can change this committee's functions in the budget process itself. I was inspired to do this after we had a number of hearings last year having to do with the California Forward proposal, where we had 27 members, and it was very difficult to have a meaningful discussion about all of the issues, because by the time each member asked a question or two, we pretty much had rolled through the process, and we weren't able to really get the back and forth that we needed. So I thought that Sub-6 process was needed to sort of fully vet those issues. We held a Sub-6 hearing on July 14th on the two issues that are coming before us today, and it was a very long and deliberative hearing, and many members remember that because it was a Friday, and we were keeping people here before they were able to go home, and a lot of folks missed their flights, but we had a really good discussion. Today's our chance, basically, to establish the first statutory provisions that will be part of a several-year-long discussion regarding budget reform efforts. And these are the first two bills of those that are coming off of the suspense. So part of the mission of Sub-6, as we mentioned, is to discuss bills that are referred to this budget committee. This mirrors the structure we use in the budget itself, where we have subcommittees vet the contents of the bill, and then the actions that are made by the subcommittee is brought to the full committee as a recommendation. We refer any bill or measure that changes the budget process, the contents of the budget, or the analysis of the budget to our suspense file, which is what we've done. Prior to this year, however, we had a suspense file, but it really was inactive since it was really first established back in 1977. That was established when it was the Ways and Means Committee. When those committees were split up into two, both fiscal committees had a suspense file, but it hadn't been used, and many of these reform bills have never been heard in Budget Committee before. But there are a lot of good ideas, and figuring out how it all fits together in this hopefully post-recession new world is going to be a challenge. Three major events have impacted our budget process. First and most obvious is that the voters have changed our budget process with the passage of Proposition 25, which finally made the budget a majority vote bill, and probably more importantly, or equally importantly, it hardened those budget deadlines. This effectively shortens our budget process by about 1.5 to 2 weeks, which may not seem like a big deal until you consider the massive size and scope of the May revision, which we usually get on May 14th, and how little time we have to vet the governor's revised proposal. We need to make sure that we don't adopt any changes that would make it harder for us to deliver an on-time budget. So that's one of the lenses that we need to use and that we are using when we look at these various reform bills. The second event was the Comptroller's recent decision to declare that the budget we passed on June 15th as being not balanced, and its justification to stop making payments to members and et cetera. The criteria that the Comptroller used to make the determination could also force us to reconsider our budget process. In particular, the Comptroller's view is that the budget was not balanced, in part because we had not adopted all of the statutory provisions necessary to fully implement the budget by June 15th. If this first criteria stands after going through the courts, it could mean that we would need, for the first time, to adopt all major trailer bills with the budget package. I was hoping that Prop 25 would give us a chance to vet some of these complicated proposals more after we had put the budget to bed. But with all the complaints about the lack of transparency we've had recently, I think the public would also like us to make sure that we properly vet these things. Given the tighter timeframes I mentioned, I hope the Comptroller's criteria is eventually overturned so we can explore having more transparent and deliberative process for trailer bills. The third item, which I think is important to mention in terms of the budget processing, was the St. John decision regarding the line item veto authority. In the ruling, the courts expanded the governor's ability to veto funding in the budget to include reductions. This continues a trend of the governor gaining power in the budget process at the expense of the legislature. We spent most of the last session besieged by fiscal emergencies called by the governor under powers granted to him by Proposition 58 of 2004. We need to be mindful how the checks and balances of our budget process are maintained in our deliberations. The legislature is the only part of the budget process itself that's actually open to the public to view and participate, and we need to be careful to protect our role and not cede our power without good reason. So, as we move into this hearing, I want to establish some different ground rules in terms of how we operate, because this is a very different kind of hearing. A lot of members have asked that we try to expedite this hearing. There's a lot of things going on. And also, I want to make sure that this hearing is not simply a relitigation of the subcommittee hearing, because part of the whole point of having these subcommittee hearings is that we want to have a process where we can really vet the issues. It was originally suggested to me that we go with the appropriations model, which is after something comes off suspense, you don't have a hearing. You just go to a vote-only calendar. And that is an option that we can consider as a group. But I thought maybe there's something in between relitigating a subcommittee's work and basically making that work meaningless and doing a vote-only hearing. And that's what we're going to try to do today, which is a sort of concise hearing based on the changes that are made, but a very different kind of hearing than the kinds I've conducted in the past, because usually the budget issues, I feel, is really important for all of us to explore the issues, and people go on for a long period of time, and that's very productive because we're usually not focused on a vote. This time around, we are focused on a vote, and what I'm going to do is ask all members to keep their comments limited to 2 minutes. I'm going to have the timer apply all these rules equally among everybody. We're not going to have long testimony. We'll have a short opening from the author for each bill. We'll have a very short testimony, and then 2 minutes or less, and then we'll have, if their supporters or opponents want to state their name and their position, that's fine. And then we'll go to members back and forth on a very truncated basis. But it's not to lessen the dialogue. It's really to acknowledge the fact that we've had a subcommittee process that really spent the time doing that, and we want to make that the vehicle that we have the in-depth exploration. So I ask members to sort of join with me in trying to make this experiment work, because we are trying to explore how we work these new budget changes. This is new grounds for us as a budget committee to start exploring budget reform. But I think it's incredibly important, and I'm committed to doing it, both in terms of the actions of Sub 6 to implement performance-based budgeting, but also to take on these budget bills. So let's get started. Yes. Mr. Vice Chair.
If I may, and I understand we're going to have a very deliberative hearing here.
Sure.
I would appreciate a
microphone
written copy of your opening statement. It raises some concerns. Our budget process has ebbed and flowed, but it's been a little bit more open the last 2 years, but not near enough. And I fear that some of the verbiage I've heard you state in your opening statement are just going to be kind of covers for having even less transparency, more hasty passage of these trailer bills that are going to be coming before us in the next 2 weeks. So I don't quite understand the process. I need to study it. I know you've made representations to me, and I trust you absolutely that you want to have it be open and be very deliberative. What I do not support, and will scream and yell all over the place about, if our staff gets 10, 20, or 20 minutes, as we did with one of the education trailer bills, to review it before we vote on the floor. And if we don't have a very thorough hearing on every kind of cleanup bill of the statutory provisions that was so messily done in round one of this budget. So I need, Mr. Chairman, to better understand this process that we're embarking on in the next couple of weeks to fine-tune this budget, because it will probably apply to us when we come back in October or November to do more work, which I expect that we certainly will do. So please allow me to better understand what you have just outlined, because I'm really not sure.
Okay, well, first things first, let's do the roll call and establish the quorum. So clerk, can you call the roll?
Blumenfeld. Nielsen. Alejo. Allen. Berryhill. Bonilla. Brownlee. Buchanan. Butler. Cedillo. Chesborough.
Here.
Dickinson.
Here.
Fuhr. Gordon. Harkey. Huffman. Jeffries. Jones. Logue. Mansour. Mitchell. Monning.
Here.
Morrell. Nastandi. Swanson.
Present.
Valadeo. Wagner.
Quorum has been established. Before we get started, I want to thank the author working closely with my office. We spent a lot of time on this bill. The recommendation as it is amended is a do pass as amended. And with that, I would ask the author to give her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I appreciate very much, first of all, the time that your sub-6 spent on SB 14 last month. It was a pretty long and inclusive and incredible hearing. And I do appreciate the opportunity to present to the full committee today. I also want to thank committee staff for their help on the amendments that we're proposing today. My joint author, actually two of my joint authors are here, Mark Desaulniers, of course, who you'll hear from later, but Bob Huff, who is here, joining me, and will speak after I do, if you like. SB 14 will direct the Department of Finance to draft the state budget using performance-based budgeting practices. As we know, adopting a performance-based approach to budgeting will give the legislature, state agencies, and the public better information on what is working and where change is needed. In a recent deliberative poll, which was put out by What's Next California, 90% of registered voters supported increased accountability, including the establishment of goals, performance measures, and reporting progress against those goals, which is what the bill requires. The amendments that we discussed with the committee direct the Department of Finance to draft, first, a plan to do this, to roll out performance-based budgeting by August 1st, 2012. Then, between 2013 and 2018, performance-based budgeting will become the way budgets are put together. This pushing back of the start date by 1 year, we think, is reasonable. They also provide, the amendments do, the administration more time for implementation, allowing the integration of performance-based budgeting with the development and launch of the state's new accounting system called Fiscal. The amendments defer to each house of the legislature in how it responds to this implementation plan rather than specify how that would happen. It also deletes the direction to the legislature for a decennial view, a 10-year review of the state programs, but in turn codifies our intention that we incorporate performance information into annual policy, fiscal, and oversight decisions. Remember, this is a partnership. The heart of the bill is a partnership between what the legislature does and the administration, leading to more transparency and accountability. I want to thank each of you who have joined me and Senators Huff and Desaulniers on the bill, including the chair. I very much appreciate your support and working with my staff on this issue as we move this forward. I have a number of speakers who will bring expertise and perspectives to the issue. Sonny Wright McPeak first, former BT&H secretary and a board member to California Forward. Ashley Martinez, representing SEIU. Fred Noteware, representing the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which has offered to assist with training, financing for staff, the legislature, and the Department of Finance as we move forward. That is a tremendous help. Davis Campbell, who is here with Saving California Communities, is a board member to EdSource and the Stewart Foundation, and John Maltby, who is a former CEO of San Mateo County, former city manager of Milpitas and Glendale, and also a consultant at California Forward. So I ask for your aye vote.
Great, thank you.
You're on.
And Mr. Huff, if you'd like to add some comments to that?
Yeah, let me just add something very quickly. Many of us in this room have spent a lot of time on the budget together. It's been all budget all year long. And whether you take the position that we don't collect enough taxes, whether we collect too much in taxes, or everything's just right, I think the voters and the public would agree, as we should, that when we have that money in trust, that we're stewards of it, that we should do everything possible to make sure that we are spending it wisely. And that's what this bill does. It brings a level of accountability to the budget process, which is not here now. It's a step in the right direction. It certainly isn't a panacea that will cure everything, but our testimony from former Secretary Sonny McPeak will certainly tell how she did something in her department. We can make a difference. This is a simple bill. Appreciate working with the chair on this, and look forward to a positive outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Witnesses in support, and again, limiting it to 2 minutes maximum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Sonny McPeak on behalf of California Forward and the coalition spectrum of organizations who are advancing this measure. I'm here first and foremost to thank you for your leadership, the time that you personally have spent in joining the authors. There is an impressive list of bipartisan co-authors, and I want to hasten to say that when you hear from labor, SEIU, and employers, and civic organizations, and the Council of Churches, so I presume our proceedings are blessed here, that that's a milestone in California. This is indeed a monumental opportunity that all of you have seized and are going to, I think, vote on today affirmatively. I had the opportunity in mid-July to sit here with Sub 6. I said then, I want to repeat, I'm actually a little embarrassed to be before you because there is so much expertise resident in this room, and all of you know how important it is to be able to say, what are we going to achieve, and then deliver that for the taxpayers. I have delivered testimony as a secretary where I had a pretty large agency, and in less than a year, we instituted performance-based budgeting and management and turned around things. I've also been a local official. I look at this room 3 decades plus ago. I was testifying before Mr. Nielsen when he was a member of the legislature. I was working with Mr. Nastandi's father. Wes was a, Mr. Tresborough was a supervisor. And Mr. Swanson was running Congress. So we've been at this for a long time. We asked for your aye vote. We think it's positive, very positive, the amendments that have been taken. Mr. Silva, Fred tells me that's exactly the case. The administration and finance have really stepped up. And I want to urge you to continue to be involved as the legislature as this is implemented. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Are there any other witnesses in support wish to give their name and affiliation?
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Fred Noteware, representing the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. And just briefly, we're very supportive of this bill. And as someone who's been around a while and have worked in the legislature myself, I think those of you on this committee who sit on the subcommittees will benefit from the extra information that will be provided to you so you can make better and deeper decisions. And the way this is going to be done is not unlike the way the private sector does its own budgeting. So we urge an aye vote, and thank you.
Thank you. And additional witnesses at this point, just for your name and affiliation.
Ashley Martinez with SEIU Local 1000, urging your support for SB 14.
Mr. Chair, member Cesar Diaz on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, also in strong support.
Olga Lilia Ramirez with the California State Student Association in support.
And I'm Davis Campbell, representing a community group in Yolo County of local elected officials and community members, and we're strongly in support of this. We'd like to see the same requirements for accountability and efficiency that we have to deal with at the local level applied at the state level.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, Chris McKaylee on behalf of the California Grocers Association, also in support of SB 14.
Kelly McKechnie on behalf of Tech America in support. Thank you.
John Maltby, California Forward County Manager, San Mateo County, urging your support and telling you that in our county, when we implemented it, it worked, and I think it can work in the state.
Okay. Are there any witnesses who wish to speak in opposition? We'll have 2 minutes for that if anyone wishes. Seeing none, we're going to move to questions. I'm going to make a quick comment to start. I'm not going to ask any questions. I had a lot of questions out previously. The most important thing in the revision of this bill that you mentioned, but is that we are now tracking it with the rollout of FISCAL. which is incredibly important because there's already all this money being spent on retraining people through Fiscal, and if we make it as part of the computer, the program itself, performance metrics, and we have the training built into that, we can save a lot of money as a state, and we can take the time to ramp up. And toward that ramp up, and it's something that the witnesses mentioned, it's not something that happens automatically. It's going to take leadership in the administration, so there needs to be 100% buy-in, and it's going to take our continued effort, and that's where Sub 6 comes in. We've started this process. We've asked for metrics from a couple of departments, DMV and Caltrans, to come forward. We're going to have that hearing in September where we vet the metrics that they bring forward, and we're going to begin to implement. But in order for this to work, it's great for us to pass a bill, but that's not going to do it. We're going to have to, as a legislature and as body, do the groundwork to make it work, and the administration will. So with that, Mr. Nielsen has the first question, and then just I'll take a list. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senators Walk and Huff, if you can do so with these amendments, I'd like to be added as a co-author as well.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's a very positive step in the right direction. The determination of the performance matrix, reading the bill, not the analysis, but the bill, I'm not clear. Will the individual department come up with the metrics, or will the Department of Finance? What will be the parameters that guide? Who makes that determination? The Finance, or each department comes up with their own metrics?
The department comes up with those, but they are in consultation with workforce and clients. They're designed to be a collaborative effort. So they will be, those will then be brought to the legislature to be looked at.
Okay, so there is, I didn't read it.
In whatever way the legislature decides to do it, depending on how each house is organized.
Let me understand that, and that comforts me, but I don't see the language in the bill says it comes to the legislature. Maybe it's there. How will it be submitted to the legislature? And we make the final determination and approve the metrics.
I have the old bill.
Okay.
That won't work. Okay. Comes to us in the governor's budget each year. Right.
Pardon?
It would come to us in the governor's budget. It would come to us, the legislature, in the governor's budget each year.
Okay. And each
on
year,
an annual
the specific guidelines, points, the matrices will be there for us to review.
And the report on results.
Okay.
So just to add, this is intended to be a very open and transparent process, as you've discussed here, that there's an obligation, as the amendments now have been advanced and finance supports, for the administration to take a lead, but to get from departments and all of those stakeholders that the departments interact with their proposals. Finance will work on that to advance and give to the governor, who then puts into a budget for you to review those initial metrics. You review them, you can refine them, and then you get a report every year.
Okay. Supervisor McPeak, if you could ask some of the staff to talk to my staff and give them the exact reference section in the bill that I didn't catch that. I have no doubt it's there, but I'd like to look at the actual language.
Right.
Then just one last. Thank you,
13335.
1355?
The amends. That section was amended.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The last concern, or just waiving a potential concern, I'm just wondering if the agencies and if finance are going to ask for a whole lot more PYs to do all of this. Can they do it with existing resources without asking for more?
So Assemblymember Neal said, my role here is to be the old lady who keeps talking about budget reform and to tell you it cannot, should not, must not cost any more. They shouldn't be asking for any more PYs. There probably will be a need for some resources as a catalyst for Department of Finance to train folks. That's why it's important that the Leadership Council of Silicon Valley, California Forward, all of us in the non-government sector have said we'll help. We'll come forward as partners, if you will, to help you with this. But as Secretary, we did all of this with no new money, no new people. In fact, I had less people than what was authorized. I couldn't get positions filled.
Got it.
Thank you.
They may well, but that is within discretion of the legislature to appropriate that. And we are looking toward other resources to assist with training.
Training will be a big deal here.
It's going to be a very important part of this.
Okay, let's move on to Mr. Jones.
Let me just finish. We'll be sensitive to that, but I'm certainly going to instruct our staff to be very fastidious at looking at this. Agencies are historic and notorious for doing it. Most recently, the State Lands Commission, most disgustingly, have a little problem, and they blame it on the fact that they've lost a bunch of PYs. It costs the state an awful lot of money, and they blame it all on PYs. That doesn't sell around here anymore. Excuse that editorial comment, but it does relate to how we need to be careful here and not let this become bureaucratized, something that's trying to stop that or impede it. A good reform gets taken over by the agencies and just turned upside down.
Timing-wise, I gave a lot of extra deference to the vice chair, but I do want to keep, as we move through the members, 2 minutes a shot, and then we can do another round. But again, we don't want to relitigate the previous one. But Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Senator Wolk. Thank you for bringing this bill, and co-authors also. As a prior vice mayor and business owner, I certainly support performance-based budgeting. As a result of the actions in Sacramento, every year my city had to go back and reevaluate our budget and find out what things in our budget were working and which things weren't working, and retool the ones that weren't working or eliminate them. I just want to point out, for the purposes of the public and for the professionals that work in this building and throughout Sacramento and California, that I remain discouraged and disappointed at the state's budgeting process. This bill, which is a good bill, started out as a good bill, landed on my desk yesterday with 19 amendments. And most of those amendments made a good bill less good. But it does still move us in the positive direction and where we need to go. But it's very frustrating to try to have a professional attitude towards budgeting and running a state and representing the citizens of California when committees and processes within the building are such that we're still renegotiating, we're still tinkering, we're still playing with, we're still admonishing or holding ransom a bill. And then for it to land on our desk with 19 amendments and be expected within 18 hours to make a decision on that bill, I think the public needs to know that that's how we're doing the budget process at this point in time. And Senator Wolk, this is certainly not a criticism of you, because my staff communicated these frustrations with your staff yesterday, and they're very gracious in answering them and answering my staff's concerns as quickly as possible. So I thank you and your staff for being responsive. I know that these amendments came from the Assembly side, and they were held up for a long time until we were able to get them onto our desk. So I am in support of the bill. I just want the public to know that we're still dysfunctional in Sacramento, but this bill does move us into a positive direction, and hopefully as we continue through this budgeting process, it'll continue to get better. Thank you very much.
Do you have a response, or can we move to Mr. Nestande?
I would like to respond to that. This bill has been 3, maybe 4 years in the making, hearing after hearing, and the basic structure has not changed. Yes, there were some changes based on further discussions, not only with this House, but with the Department of Finance and the governor's representatives, to make sure that we have a bill, given the basic structure, that is workable, that will just not be put on a shelf should it pass and be signed. We want this to be a real tool for all of us. That's what's taken so long.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to clarify that my criticisms are not of you or your office. Thank you.
Mr. Nestande.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is for either Senator or Secretary McPete. If you could go over with me, just take a few minutes. In 1993, Governor Wilson had a performance-based pilot program of 4 programs or for departments. And the LAO did a study, and I'm just going to quote one quick sentence from that study in 1996. It said, specifically, it failed to fundamentally change the budget process or produce substantial cost savings in state operations. So my question is, what did we learn, if anything, from that previous effort, and what are we going to be doing differently going forward than we did previously?
What we learned from that effort is that follow-through and commitment and partnership between the legislature and the administration is key here, and that was lacking. This is not something we just pass a bill and it happens. This truly has to be a commitment on the part of the administration and a commitment on the part of the legislature. This is a partnership, and I can't guarantee that if we pass this that we won't have the same problem. But we are trying to devise a bill and an approach that will be adopted and incorporated by both the administration and monitored by the legislature to make sure it is effective. And it's not just for 1 year. It's
Sure.
a way of doing business.
Well, and hopefully there's more than just commitment. I mean, hopefully there's some specific processes that did not work well, or something like that. I would hope that we can take out of that experiment that didn't go well. And specifically, are we making preparations for downsizing in areas? Because I certainly hope that through this process we come to the conclusion that we can operate more efficiently and more effectively with a smaller bureaucracy. And I'm wondering, do we have a process that says, yes, this department is duplicative of that department? And do we have a process to say, yes, we might have a smaller government at the end. I hope we have a smaller government at the end of this process. Do we have those type of procedures in place?
It's not possible to predict the direction in which this would go, except to say you want the public dollar to be used effectively. In some cases, some programs may no longer be effective, in which case there ought to be some change in the resources that are allocated to that program. In other areas, perhaps, there's not enough allocation of resources. That's what performance-based budgeting is about. You're asking yourself, is this working? Is this program for children giving us healthier children? Is this program providing licenses in an efficient manner? And again, depending on the goals you set up, you want to be able to answer those questions for yourselves, since you appropriate money, but also for the public. So you want to make sure that you're giving out the resources in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Appreciate it. One last comment, Mr. Chairman.
We'll come back to you. It's a very quick comment,
Very quick.
because you've exceeded your 2 minutes by some. So,
well, real quick, I would just say, in my experience in local government and so forth, it's the response time that is the biggest issue for people dealing with the government. Is they don't seem to have an end game. If they do not get back in time, there's no penalty, there's no consequence. It's just, we'll get back to you when we feel like it. Sorry we didn't make that, we'll try again. And I'll end with that, and hopefully we can correct that situation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dickinson, followed by Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question and a quick comment. And the question, Ms. Wolk, is this. Many of us who've served at the local level have looked at the state level and desired that there be performance-based approaches with respect to those programs that counties are principally required to carry out. I can't quite tell from the bill whether it reaches that far or whether that's a next step, and I was just curious about that.
Reaches to the counties.
Well, not to the counties directly, but that this would include departments using performance-based approaches for the programs, health and welfare programs principally, but now with realignment and corrections as well, the responsibilities that counties are taking on. So they would only need to meet performance-based objectives set by the state, as opposed to the more command and control kind of regime that currently exists.
Well, I think it would be my desire and my belief that realignment is a wonderful example of how a partnership between the state and the locals, and the counties in particular, could provide better services and incorporate jointly arrived at goals and measurements to provide better services. I think that we have to have some kind of evaluation or monitoring or oversight, but it has to be in partnership with the counties, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity to do that. I don't see it as command and
I hope it
control.
will be seen that
I would
way.
hope so. I would like that to be the case.
That's a good start. And I would just say, Mr. Chairman, very, very quickly, I think this bill is a very significant step in the right direction. That we need to create a system of performance-based approaches for the state of California, and that commitment to it is, in fact, at the core of success. Finally, I'd like to be added, if I may, as whatever highest level of co-author you will entertain.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I'm reminding members that we have had an extensive hearing on this. This is the hearing that's going to be slightly more than a vote-only hearing. So again, members keep it as brief as they can. Ms. Harkey, followed by Mr. Berryhill.
Well, I will be very brief. I attended the hearing, and I applaud the results. They're not perfect. They were amended, but it's a step in the right direction. That being said, we understand that follow-through and commitment is very important. And one of the problems that we have in this legislature and in the state of California is that a third of the Assembly House is new every 2 years. So it's very difficult for us to make this commitment because we won't be here to enforce it. So I am hoping that staff is listening, because they often direct the new members, which is the unfortunate circumstance of our term limits, and that the business community stays involved, because I have found that they are here long beyond the legislature. And I would love to see, I want this to work. I think it's very important that it works. But our memories here are extremely short, and it's because we've got a revolving door, I think, and there's no chance to get depth. And so I applaud the effort, and I'll just rely that we're going to make commitment and that our staffs will keep the newer members engaged, and that the business community will continue to be engaged even after the good times roll again. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Berryhill, followed by Ms. Mitchell.
Well, I just want to applaud the author and all those that collaborated to bring this bill forward. I think it's something that's very long overdue, and real accountability in government. And so I applaud you for the work you've done. And no matter how, this may not be perfect, but many of the things we do in this legislature aren't perfect. We try, we vet them, we talk about them, we bounce ideas around. And at the end of the day, oftentimes, no matter how well you think you've done something, you have the law of unintended consequences. And so I think this process is going to help in the budgeting process to address those as you go forward and make those corrections and ultimately save. None of us here want to waste tax dollars. We may want to save tax dollars to spend in certain other areas, and we may agree or disagree on those areas, but we don't want to waste tax dollars. And so I know from serving on school board, we had a very similar process, strategic planning, and it really, really turned our school district around and gave us vision of where we were going as an organization. And so I applaud you, I thank you, and I strongly support this.
Thank you, Mr. Berryhill. Ms. Mitchell, followed by Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you, Senator Wilk. I appreciate the opportunity to be an active participant in what will ultimately be a culture shift in this institution, so I look forward to that. As Sub-1 Chair, I look forward to the opportunity at kind of starting our dialogue in our committee hearings from the place of evaluating where departments have landed against their performance measures and making decisions from that place going forward. One question I have, in having reviewed some of the work, some of the analysis NCSL has done and looking at performance-based budgeting across states, and recognizing that states are most successful when the performance measures have really started at the department level and are then kind of evaluated and they're held accountable by the legislature. This is kind of a 10,000-foot level question when I recognize what we're facing in California in terms of multiple year budget deficits. My concern is that we don't get caught in a situation where we perceive poor performance in departments or programs that have ultimately been underfunded.
Correct.
And so how do we protect ourselves against that tendency?
I think that that is a very important issue, and that's why it's very important that the performance measures reflect the work of the department, including the workforce and the clients. They have to be realistic in light of what resources are available, and that's always a concern. But I think that when resources are scarce, it's precisely the time that we force ourselves internally to look at objectives and whether we're meeting them, because if we're not, then we really need to take the resources away and put them in areas where they will be more effective. So the question that from your perspective, when I was a county supervisor and knowing of your interest, is the child getting healthier? Instead of just saying there have been X number of visits and, you just, are the children getting healthier? And if they're not, forcing the examination internally of what can we do to do a better job. And that's when it's worked well at the county level or at the city level or at the state level, that's when it's done its best.
I agree, and I just want to make sure that we have kind of a dual lens, that we don't automatically assume that the program is not working.
Correct.
From my perspective, performance-based budgeting isn't, the question is not what size government should be. That's not, I think, the question on the table based on my experience running a multi-million-dollar agency that engaged in performance-based budgeting, but really answering the core critical question about, are we asking the right question? Yeah. Are we putting the resources to the table to get us to the appropriate outcome? And so I think in an underfunded situation, we have to look both ways. There are some areas where we might decide that we need to invest and stop work in other areas. So I just wanted to make sure that we're mindful of the reality of our environment in which we're going to try to create this culture shift.
Great.
Correct. And that's why on an annual basis, this has to come back to the legislature. We have a key give and take here.
Thank you. Ms. Buchanan, followed by Mr. Swanson.
Thank you. If we don't have a motion, I would like to move the bill and would like to thank you for your, I guess, stick-to-itiveness. All of you, it's been very easy a year or so ago to say, we can't do this, but but you've stuck with it and you've worked with all the stakeholders, and I think we have a bill now that maybe isn't perfect, but is going to be a major step forward. And while I share some of the frustrations of my colleague, Assemblymember Jones, I also think back to all the special sessions we had my first term and trying to read water legislation or others at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And, fortunately, SB 14 is 7 pages and SB 10 is 15 pages, or SB 15 is 10 pages. So I think it's not unreasonable, even despite the fact that you only get it a day or so ahead of time, to ask the members to read it and to know what they're voting on. Past that, what I would like to say and reiterate what others have said, we're never going to have all the money we want to do everything we want to do, because the list could be endless. So our job when we're budgeting, whether they're in good years or bad years, is to decide how we want to allocate our resources. And really what performance-based budgeting is doing is saying, let's allocate our resources based on what our common goals are, and let's allocate resources based on data and what we know to be true and not what we assume to be true. And that's really what we're asking. We're asking for, a data-driven decision-making process so that, we take a look at how we allocate our resources in a very different way. And business has done it for, 40 years or so. We've heard our colleagues talk about local government. I was on school board. We've been doing it differently for 20 years or so, and it's time for the state to get on board, because we know that our resources are probably going to continue to be limited for a long time, and we need to make the very best decisions we can with the taxpayer dollars and do all we can to provide a high level of service. So thank you again for all your efforts on the part of all the people who have worked on this bill, including all the nonprofits, and it moves us a huge step forward, and I just appreciate all you've done.
Great, thank you. Mr. Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Senator Wolk and Senator DeSaulnier, thank you for
your effort in bringing this. I'm sorry, my good friend.
They look the same.
Bringing this bill forward, and the great bipartisan support that's been shown in this effort, and to Secretary McPeak, just thank you for your patience with doing this for such a long time. I think that is extremely important. I hope that as we go forward, that we keep in mind that this process represents a process, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that our budget should reflect our values as a state. What do we stand for? It should be reflected in the budget, however the process is organized. And when we, if that's education, as I believe it should be, then we look at those things that are working and we support them. And the budget reflects that as a priority. If we try in the budget to reduce recidivism and a program is working, hopefully the evaluation will come back that that program worked, it saved us money in the long run, and we should enhance the program. And so I would hope that that this process will lead to that kind of evaluation, so we not only will address our values, but we also will in fact address the other aspects of priorities that make California a better state, and to all the senators that have been supportive of this effort, Senator Huffman and others. We appreciate the fact that the attention paid to this issue is a bipartisan effort, but I would hope that both sides of the aisle will say, for once and for all, as we approach budgets, we will make sure that they're a reflection of our values and what California should stand for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The bill has been properly moved and seconded. Before we take a vote, Ms. Wilk, if you would like a very brief close.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, your staff, and all the members who have contributed to making this a better bill. I ask for your aye vote.
Great. With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Blumenfield?
Blumenfield, aye.
Nielsen? Aye. Alejo? Allen? Berryhill? Bonilla? Brownlee? Buchanan? Butler? Cedillo? Chesborough? Dickinson? Pure? Gordon? Harkey? Huffman? Jeffries? Jones? Logue? Mansour? Mitchell? Monning? Morrell? Nastandi? Swanson?
Swanson, aye.
Belladeo? Wagner?
Thank you.
Thank you. And clerk, how many votes is that? 20 votes. You have 20 aye votes. That bill is out. Congratulations. Again, I remind people this is really the beginning of the process, not the end, because the work lies ahead of us. Next, we'd like to call up Mr. DeSaulnier. We've got a second bill that we're hearing today. I also want to thank Sonia for working with us on amendments to address a lot of the concerns that were raised in the subcommittee. I should say, although we dealt with this issue quite extensively in the subcommittee, you waived presentation as the time was in when we were actually dealing with the details of this bill, and it's been merged to some extent with the general discussion we had on Mr. Fuhr's bill, and those two bills are very similar now, and he has become a principal co-author of your bill. What the bill does is formalizes the role of long-term projects in the budget process, so we can continue to think about the structural problem as part of the budget process. As we talked about this year, the governor used projections to refocus the goal of our budget process toward our structural budget and the wall of debt, which has been a concern that we've all raised across the aisle. I really want us to continue that discussion on the structural issues, the long-term issues. We've had at least one hearing on that. We're going to continue to have some more hearings on those bigger picture issues. From my perspective, this bill reinforces the goal that next year and we continue the important effort of looking at the long-term issues. And I'm happy, as you know, at this point, to join you as a co-author and wish for you to begin the bill with a presentation. And again, it's the same as last time. We've gone through this bill in subcommittee. The purpose of this committee hearing is to just sort of reaffirm that and have a vote. So please, Sonny, your opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will attempt to be brief. Mr. Jones's comments, if he liked the amendments on the previous bill in the process, he'll love this one. I'd say facetiously, but it's all in the eyes of the beholder. As Bismarck once said, politics is the art of the possible. So in that spirit, we've worked very closely with your staff, as the chair said. We've also been working very closely with the administration and the Department of Finance. I think it would be fair to say that we've sort of moved from multi-year budgeting in this bill to multi-year projections. But I think that's important, and it's the core of at least the spirit of what we were attempting to do. And having said that, intend to continue to work on making this as meaningful as possible. So what does the bill do with the current amendments? It requires one-time revenue identified from the Department of Finance in consultation with the chairs of the two budget committees. It gives 5-year projections of revenue and expenditures. The concerns about the art of revenues projections we try to address by looking back at how closely, so the Department of Finance will have to tell the legislature how accurate the future projections will be based on a look back on previous projections on revenue expenditures. It requires an update on those revenues and expenditures in the May revision. And last, and personally, I think importantly, and we're still in discussions, and I know that Senator Nelson has some questions about this, and I know the Republicans do, about the relationship having the University of California do an independent review on the impacts of our budget actions on the California economy. Personally, I think it's important. I understand there's some concerns from you and your consultants about having that be balanced and make sure that the appropriate schools are in contact with the chairs of the two committees and with the Department of Finance. We've had some discussions about having the vice chairs included in that. I'm open to having that continued discussion as the bill goes to the floor, but as I said to Mr. Nelson before in a sidebar, I'm just concerned about the moving parts here in our discussions with the administration. So with that, I think this is a very meaningful first step, and I do say first step, to respect to the Department of Finance and the administration. I think their spirit is they want to get this right. So that is the spirit of the amendments, and I really believe that is the spirit that we were engaged with the chair and with his staff to make sure that as we go through this is going to be an iteration. We're going to keep working on more transparency and more multi-year budgeting and more analysis, but we don't want to do anything that we have to come back and fix. We'd rather do it right and keep moving the ball down the proverbial field. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I know I have witnesses. I don't know where Sunny went, but I know she's behind me somewhere.
Okay, we're happy to hear from witnesses. Each side, a maximum of 2 minutes for the side. So,
Mr. Chair, members, thank you again. My name is Fred Noteware, representing the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We urge your aye vote and support the bill. Thank you.
Sonny McPeak on behalf of California Forward. Thank you, Senator DeSaulnier, the co-authors, the work that you've all done to bring this bill to this point, and this advances the overall effort of better budgeting for California.
Any additional witnesses in support?
Yes, Steve Juarez on behalf of the University of California. We've been discussing with Senator DeSaulnier for the last year or so ways in which the university can be of assistance to the state in terms of economic forecasting, and we were happy to work with the committee and with both houses of the legislature and the administration on future efforts in that regard, and so we're in support of the amendments. Thank you.
Hi, Ogolilia Ramirez with the California State Student Association. We represent the students in the Cal State system, and we're in support. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any witnesses who wish to come forward in opposition? Seeing none, we will move to members' questions, and we'll start with Mr. I've asked most of my questions in subcommittee, so I'm going to skip myself. Mr. Nestande.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think this is a very good bill, and I appreciate Senator bringing it forward. And if you could just comment quickly, if you can, or however long you want, actually, on the PAYGO part of the bill. I really appreciate that part. And then also, as you referred earlier in your remarks about using the University of California to study the effects of any process in the state budget, how that affects the state. But do you also balance that with, or can you balance that with effects of regulatory agencies and how that affects the state economy and so forth? I realize this is just more of a budget bill, but I think that's a fair comparison then.
On the PAYGO provision, that's one of the things in discussion with the committee chairman and his staff and the Department of Finance. It was a concern. I personally am very committed to pursuing that. The trade-off is we get projections on, not projections, but they have to identify one-time expenditures. So we sort of negotiated out, I'd love to have PAYGO, but if I'm not going to get it signed and you're concerned about the implementation of that and the complexity, maybe we start on identifying one-time revenues. So if we look back during the tech boom, if we were doing that then, we would at least have that provision of it. So we can continue to work on the PAYGO. On the UC situation, it's my belief, and I think this is something we can work across the aisle with, and as Senator Huff and I have had, and Senator Dutton and I have had long discussions about the idea of cost benefits. It's the same thing with this. It's not my intention of gaming the system, and I want to make sure that future legislature administrations here, regardless of party, don't game the issue. I think non-ideologically, we're all here to see if we can make things work better and make the system be more efficient, and if we have more impartial analysis, I think that's a good thing. So I'm committed for as long as I'm here is to work with you, work with all of our colleagues to get to that point. And I do think this is, again, this is an iteration in that direction that heretofore we haven't been able to even make those kind of movements in the right direction, if you ask me.
Well, thank you, and like I said, I appreciate you bringing this forward.
Mr. Fuhrer, followed by Mr. Swanson.
I just want to speak very briefly, Mr. Chair, Mr. DeSaulnier. Members of the committee might recall that Mr. DeSaulnier and I, each in our respective houses, presented multi-year budgeting bills. And I just wanted to make clear that, again, in what I hope is a continuing spirit of collaboration rather than contention between our houses, I'm strongly supportive and have joined Mr. DeSaulnier in his legislation. There should be no confusion. There may have been two bills, one from each house, but at this point there's one bill that reflects a common effort to move in this direction. I appreciate the Senator's efforts.
I'm honored to be a partner with you, Mr. Fuhrer. If I could just say that with a straight face.
No, you two have been the dynamic duo on a lot.
And now
of
I have to listen to Mr. Swanson.
Yeah. No, but you two have been the dynamic duo on some of this stuff with the California Forward stuff last year, and both spent a lot of time moving the ball forward on all of these California Forward reforms, of which these two are extensions of. So I want to acknowledge both of you and thank you both. Mr. Swanson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, I just wanted to say personally, my personal thanks to you and Senator Wolf and Senator Huff for your leadership on the previous bill, and you also need to be commended for keeping this issue up front. And so, thank you.
I'd like to move the bill.
Okay, bill's been moved and second. We have some more questions. Mr. Nielsen, followed by Mr. Jones.
I just want to thank Senator DeSaulnier for considering the addition of the vice chairs, and I understand it's dynamic and proceeding and would consider our dialogue. Amendments could be taken on the floor, so thank you for the consideration. I just think that's the fair and equitable way to at least have some input from the minority. Thank you.
Mr. Jones. Yeah, Mr. Jones.
Mr. DeSaulnier, thank you very much for your bill, and I certainly support the intent of the bill and especially support a two-year budget process. We've got to get to the point in California where we are creating some stability for our business community, not only just our business community, but also the departments of the state that every year are having to react from our dysfunctional budget process. So I'm disappointed that was taken out of your bill. I do remain concerned about the University of California, and I understand your answers. But my concern remains that it creates a conflict of interest when the University of California gets their budget approved by this legislature, and in future legislators or they could get partisan pressure regarding their budgets on how they analyze the budget. So I think I would be more interested in finding a more independent source for that analysis than the University of California system. I'm probably not going to support the bill, but I do want you to know that I support the intent and where you're trying to move. Thank you.
almost as good as an aye vote.
Okay. Ms. Harkey, did you have a comment? I couldn't. Yes, Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing this forward. This is a integral piece of what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years I've been here, and this will be my 3rd year. I support the effort. I hope it's just the beginning. The process is only going to be as good as the legislature that is in this House. And so while it's not a perfect bill, and I know that future legislators won't even know what happened, will be biggest part of the problem. So when we're dealing with issues like Mr. Jones has raised, I think it's very, very important that we do have an unbiased review because we are political. We are a political House. And so whoever sits here will make the determining factors as to what gets accepted and what gets rejected. So I want to keep this within, obviously the governor has the mandate to set the agenda for the state and should. But the legislature has the obligation to understand fully what the implementation requires, and while this helps to see where we're going forward, and I think it also will explore or will show the people of the state how much spending is anticipated, how much revenue is anticipated, make us do a look back. I think that's a great idea, but I am concerned with the study potentially saying that, if we increase infrastructure spending by this amount, that we'll actually do better, when in fact we've just got this wall of debt that we keep talking about. So we need to increase private sector employment, and to the extent that we can just increase state revenues and get us on a path without increasing state outflow on the supposition that somehow it will magically create revenues for the state to spend more. I fully support it, but that is my concern. Thank you.
Duly noted.
No additional comments from the members. I just want to say, I think it's positive that we're coming together in a bipartisan way around these issues, and that sends a positive message, and we can keep that spirit going, not just in terms of passing out this legislation, but working together to put in the reforms that I think we all fundamentally want. So with that, the bill has been properly moved and seconded, and I would ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Blumenfield?
Blumenfield, aye.
Nielsen? Alejo? Allen? Berryhill? Bonilla? Brownlee? Buchanan? Butler? DiDio? Chesborough? Dickinson? Pure? Gordon? Harkey? Huffman? Jeffries? Jones? Logue? Mansour? Mitchell? Monning?
Aye.
Morrell? Nastandi? Swanson?
Swanson, aye.
Valadeo? Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues.
And the final vote count?
21.
Well, I should say the final vote. We're going to leave the roll open both on this bill and the performance-based budget bill for about another 5 minutes. If there are any members who are not here, they can come to the chamber. But it appears your bill has enough votes. It is out, or will be out, but we're going to have some members add on.
Nice picture in the LA Times.
Aye on the first.
Roll call aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.